Welcome to the Patriot Perspective. My name is Gregory Lyakhov, and I'm joined here with Ofer Dar.
Hello, everybody.
And today is a wonderful day because it is our first podcast of the week. We will be discussing a few issues, including the speech I actually spoke at this weekend, uh, a new trade deal with the EU, and the current just recent shooting in Manhattan that took place in which someone killed, I believe it was six people, six innocent people, and went into a building in Manhattan. So I'm excited to join us here. I'm excited to join you here today, but I first over wanted to ask you if anything eventful happened over the weekend, if any of your videos went viral or anything with the war in Ukraine that we should know about.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the first upload of the week. No, nothing that's too out of the ordinary. Viral means 50,000 views, so sadly, nothing like that this week. But the battles are continuing to chug along in Ukraine, and they are actually going to get pretty interesting within the next week or two. So that's pretty much the same as usual. What I think is very interesting and what I like to really get to ask you about was your speech in New York City. You participated in a rally which
Yeah.
really was heralded as an anti-Mamdani rally, anti-democratic socialism rally. You collaborated with a lot of very prominent figures, so it was actually very impressive to see you with those people together, and you gave a very good speech. Hopefully, the clips will come out in their full entirety. So just walk us through like how it was there with Brandon Straka and what you said, and who did you encounter there? What sort of like opposition did you encounter, as well as which support did you see over there?
Yeah, so I first want to start off by thanking Brandon Straka for inviting me. He is a hero in my books. What he has done, he doesn't need to do these rallies. He doesn't get money for them. He pays for them himself. He has spent his own time on a Sunday organizing this, running around. What I saw there was truly someone who dedicated himself to what he believes in, and that's advocating against a socialist mayor. So I want to thank him. He's truly one of my biggest mentors and my new friend. So I hope to have him on this show quite soon. I've also met with a few other people, including Jim Walden, who is currently running for New York City mayor, aside from obviously the Cuomo, Adams, and Mamdani, which are the three biggest candidates right now and most known. But there's Jim Walden, wonderful guy. He was very kind. He used to be one of the biggest attorneys in New York City, and now he's running for mayor. Truly just humble guy. It was wonderful meeting him, and I hope to have him on our podcast soon too. Aside from that, there was a few other people that I've met, but really what I want to focus on is what the rally consisted of. And we had around 1,000 to maybe a little bit more than 1,000 people there who were advocating against Mamdani. But what I liked to see was that there was also people that disagreed with us there at the same rally. However, while we were giving the speech, those people that disagreed with us couldn't really voice their perspective. But we had a debate table, and what that debate table was there were four of us sitting, and we had an open mic. Anyone who had a question, who disagreed with us, could come up and ask them. So I want to first start off by saying that I'm actually very disappointed by the supporters of our campaign that were there because it, I'm not even exaggerating, they actually attacked these people who disagree with us. So one person who
Yeah.
called old Trump supporters a pedophiles, which is obviously ridiculous, but he was attacked by a Trump supporter. These Trump supporters started yelling at these people who were trying to ask us questions and debate. And it just reminds me that the right can never turn into what the left is. If we want to be better than the left, then we can't start attacking our opposition. We can't start yelling at them when they try to speak. We have to listen and hear them out and let themselves make them look stupid, not make us look stupid by attacking them. And that's what I felt happened a lot in this rally, and that's what I didn't like at all. It really prevented some very good conversations from happening, and it closed the rally down early. I also want to thank the NYPD for being there. There was many police officers that defended us, as well as many protesters that were there, including a very interesting protester who unfortunately we can't show the video here, but I recommend that you search it up. It is quite funny.
Yeah.
This protester, let's just say, got arrested for a
Indecent exposure.
For indecent exposure,
Yeah.
exactly. So you can only imagine how funny it was. But really, the rally was wonderful. It was a big success. We really started to advocate for what we believed in, and it showed that New Yorkers are ready to walk away from a mayoral candidate that is truly a anti-Semite, a Jew hater, a Israel hater, just horrible person. We'll discuss this a little bit more in later in the video, especially
Mm.
in light of the shooting that
Yeah.
occurred yesterday. But uh, overall, I just want to say that rally was wonderful. We are planning many more, hopefully once a week, once or
Wow.
once every other week.
To do
So
that.
there's many more events, and next time, if you can, join us. But if you can't, we understand. Um, but yeah, Ofer, I actually want to transition a little bit and ask you about a trade deal that occurred yesterday with the EU
Mm.
and the United States. It's one of the more significant trade deals that was made, and it seems like the left-wing media is not talking about it. So first, I want to ask what is the trade deal? Why is it so important? And B, why is the left-wing media silent about it?
Yeah, sure. So this is up there as one of the most significant trade deals up to date. Actually, I would say it's more significant than the Japanese trade deal that we talked about in our last individual podcast. So just to give you guys some perspective, Trump had basically instituted 20% tariffs on all EU countries on Liberation Day, if you guys recall. I think that was March of this year. And then he actually threatened to raise it up to 50, which would be really a huge deal for both European and American markets because 18% of American imports come from the EU. So the EU, obviously, they make a lot of money off of selling us their products. So he never actually went through that. What he did do was threaten to raise it to 30% by August if there wasn't an agreement. And so now we're pretty close to August, obviously. The pressure was looming on the EU Commission leader, Ursula von der Leyen. And even though she really talked a big game about fighting Trump and having these reciprocal tariffs on the United States, the EU has always been known as a sort of body that's very open to markets all across the world. It's not like them to put tariffs that are 10%, 15%. So they were much easier to push around than, for instance, China will be. And that's why there are negotiations that are continuing to, get stalled and they have to progress now to the next stage in China. Whereas in Europe, they agree to it. They really do want to continue benefiting from American products and vice versa. So the United States definitely did achieve a victory with the terms of the agreement. First of all, the United States, they are going to institute a flat tariff rate of 15%. So for the most part, products coming in from Europe will have that 15% rate. Whereas when you look at steel, aluminum, copper, that's going to remain 50%. 50% is a really high amount, and that's amazing for American industries. It's going to put a huge emphasis on protecting American steel companies, and it's going to convince a lot of companies that outsource their jobs to move them back to the United States in order to avoid those high costs and still have access to the American markets. Now, there are some exceptions because you do have, for instance, uh, aircraft parts, aerospace parts, pharmaceutical drugs that are exempt from the tariffs, but those are sort of like marginal products. For the most part, it's going to be 15%. Besides that, the EU is also going to invest a lot in the United States. They're going to commit to investing $600 billion dollars. And this is just like a catch-all commitment to American agriculture, automobiles, pharmaceuticals as well, semiconductors, etc. And then the more important part is that they're going to invest over the next 3 years $750 billion dollars in American energy. This will help them reduce reliance on Russia, and they will buy American LNG and petroleum. So that's a huge deal for American energy dominance going into the next couple of years. Yeah, so besides that, there are a couple more terms, I believe, when it comes to buying military products, but there wasn't like specifics about it. So this is a huge victory, and that's why the left-wing media is not talking about it. Economists projected that there would be massive inflation caused by this, in that no deals would be really agreed upon, that Trump would cave to all these countries eventually because he wouldn't want to have his approval rating go down. But eventually, he proved all those experts wrong. And now everybody else is coming to the table, with the exception of countries like China that actually do have the way to sort of like leverage with the United States, to such a degree that even in the EU itself, like in France, their prime minister he claimed that it was an embarrassment for the entire continent. And that just shows you guys how much the United States was able to achieve. So that's really why it's happening. And I want to know whether you think that it is as positive as I made it out to be.
Yeah. So I first want to start off by saying that, in my perspective, the most interesting and impactful part of this entire trade deal is the energy sector investments. Because if we look at why the Ukraine war started, the Russia-Ukraine war started, a big reason why Russia was powerful enough to defeat you, or well, to almost defeat Ukraine and to start the war, to send their people into this war, is a big reason because of that is because of the energy reliance of the EU on Russia. We saw companies like Germany buying billions and billions of dollars in oil, gas, natural gas from Russia because at the very same time, February of 2021, I believe, uh, we saw the Biden administration stopping the oil licenses, the fracking licenses, all of that. We saw that in 2021 at the same exact time. And he was planning on extending that past the 90-day initial stop. And if that would have happened, it would have crushed the US economy. And that 90-day pause on oil definitely impacted these European countries because now instead of buying oil from the United States, they would start buying oil from other countries, including Russia. And Russia, obviously being a very big oil producer, sold it at a much more reasonable rate. So, having any investment and promise to buy American oil is always better to reduce not only reliance on Russian oil, but also reliance on OPEC and all the other oil, Venezuela,
Yeah.
every other oil-rich country. It's going to really benefit the United States greatly, and it will prevent any sort of conflict like the Russia-Ukraine war from happening in a different region of the world. Now, I also want to go into the fact that the UK trade deal, which happened in right in late April, early May,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, the UK
Hey.
trade deal was also very significant. But obviously, because of Brexit, the UK is not a part of the EU anymore.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that everyone is claiming that because of Brexit, the UK suffered greatly. But it seems as if they got a much better trade deal than the
Yeah.
EU did. So
Mhm.
it's again a reminder that uh, like what economists say is just completely false sometimes because if the EU consisted of the UK also, they would have gotten even a worse trade deal. So it's interesting to see that. I also think that the UK is allying more with the United States under the Trump administration. They seem to be less violent towards the US, less vile and compared to countries like I don't know, Germany and the rest of the EU. So it makes sense why they got a better trade deal. But really, this is such a win for America, and it's so surprising that no media outlet is going to be discussing this because this is extremely significant. Again, Trump is protecting the steel industries, which are the backbone of American society. They're in the Rust Belt states. You're protecting automotive industries, everything like that. So it's truly a huge, huge deal to all Americans. Now, let's not forget the billions of dollars invested by the EU will come with the billions of dollars invested by Japan, by Saudi Arabia, by the UAE. What other countries were there?
Qatar.
Japan, Qatar. So we're going to be getting so much foreign investment in the United States. It's going to be really crazy. So that's one of the biggest successes under the Trump administration that no other president in modern day history can compare to. So I'm very, very happy with that. And I hope to see even more trade deals with other countries. But really, Trump in the last in the first 6 months of his term, he closed trade deals with the biggest global superpowers in the world that create those are going to make an immense impact on all Americans, not only the top
Mhm.
1%. I am so
Yeah.
impressed by this. I am so happy this finally happened, and I hope to only see more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the points that really we've seen raised like at the beginning of Trump's term is that he's going to alienate Europe and he's going to disconnect us from our allies over there and thereby reduce American power in the future. This
Yes.
deal does the exact opposite. it means that Europe's going to be far more reliant on the United States going into the next 10 years, 20 years actually, because now Europe is forced to commit, when you add it up together, over $1 trillion in investment over a number of years into key American industries. They are also going to be forced to import the American LNG and petroleum, which is important because they themselves they want to reduce reliance on Russian oil because previously Germany was receiving oil through Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2. Obviously, since then it's been disconnected, and some of that is due to actually sabotage from allegedly the Ukrainians, but it could be the CIA. Who knows? But there's still Turk Stream, which goes through Turkey and then from there goes into Hungary and Slovakia and all these other countries. So there still are ways in which Russia can supply Europe up until 2027 when the long-term contracts die out. So then they need an alternative, obviously. And other candidates would be Azerbaijan and Qatar. So obviously the United States wants to make itself the most favorable to receive the European market next because they need it. And that's going to be very beneficial to the American economy, but it's also going to mean that Europe's reliant on the United States, and the United States can dictate terms in the future if there's ever an issue, or if one day they want to improve trade agreements. Like, let's say the trade deficit doesn't get reduced enough, then the United States will always have more leverage to improve terms.
Yeah.
So it really is a positive development. And then the one other point is in relation to military equipment. This indicates that the Europeans are still going to be very reliant on America. A lot of people talked about how maybe China will be able to influence Europe and take it away from America's sphere of influence. But now, because they're going to be so dependent on American military aid, there's no way that can happen feasibly. So this just shows that the alliance between the United States and Europe is going to be very solid. And it's also going to end up spilling into Ukraine because a lot of the excess equipment that's sold to Europe is going to be then offshored to help Ukraine continue fighting in Russia.
Yeah, and I think this could be a criticism for some people, but the Trump administration is definitely not taking a weak stance with Ukraine anymore. So we saw that he continued sending some funding there, some military weapons, and this is all understandable because Trump came into this thinking that Putin would negotiate. But Putin did not negotiate it at all. He did the exact opposite of what Trump wanted him to do. So Trump is taking the opposite stance. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't know if the situation in Ukraine will necessarily get better anytime soon. I doubt that
Yeah,
that
it
will be the
won't.
case. And I think
Definitely won't.
yeah, you know more than I do. But definitely, I want to see how that plays out. But something else that I find very interesting is that in just, I believe, a month ago, Trump created the most influential executive order he has probably created in his entire second term, which is the pharmaceutical executive order,
Yeah.
basically saying how the US is going to pressure other countries in the EU, all around the world who buy the same medicine that we do to pay in equal amounts. So the price for everyone goes kind of stagnates. So it will be equal. The US price will go down and the EU price will go up, or European price will go up. We haven't been seeing a lot of action there. That's actually what I want to see, though. I want to see him take more action there. I think it was such an influential executive order that has the potential to completely change the entire pharmaceutical industry. You know, whether you support Medicaid or Medicare or not, everyone agrees that medicine prices in the US are way too expensive. Healthcare is way too expensive, and we need to do something about that. And Trump did do something about it, but he has to follow through. Now, I'm sure RFK is working on it. I'm sure his entire team is working on it too. But I really want to see that specific executive order be a part of these massive trade deals with whether it's the EU or Japan. I don't know. So I wonder, hopefully, he will be able to accomplish it. I think it's very, it will take some time, but I wanted to get your thoughts. Like, do you think it's feasible?
Yeah, it is. But it's just a matter of sort of willpower against big pharma and their lobby because they are, first of all, threatened by the idea of allowing the people in the United States to like directly purchase from countries like Canada or in Europe where the prices are much lower. And that's why Trump didn't put any tariffs on pharmaceutical products
Yeah.
specifically, because then, a lot of people, they want to go to those areas to purchase these goods. If you put tariffs on, then naturally that's going to lead to the prices increasing for the American consumer. So that was part of the rationale behind it. And I agree with that actually. I agree with tariffs on most products, but pharmaceuticals is definitely a red line. And one of the best ways to actually reduce the cost of drugs would be to like allow the Department of Health and Human Services and allow specific departments or organizations like Medicare, Medicaid to directly negotiate the price of drugs with these companies.
which
And
we
that's,
saw under
yeah,
the Biden
yeah, that's
administration,
what
right?
Biden did. Exactly. So if that's continued and it's done in a more intense way, in a way that, you do in basically any other purchase or any other contract between two parties, including the government, when they try to negotiate like federal contracts with the defense industry or with like construction companies, like that always happens. So the same standard should be applied to the pharmaceutical industry.
And probably that was Biden's best move under his administration.
Yeah.
I think the CHIPS Act were probably his only successes. But again, it's not like he even accomplished that. It actually started under the Trump administration, but then when Trump left office, Biden picked it up. So I give him credit. But more of that should happen. I haven't really seen the impact of that though, because it only happened for the last what year-ish. I think he had negotiated it. I think it came out about a year or year and a half ago. So there was
Mm.
no real impact that is measurable yet, but I'm hoping to see it later on. Something else that we see in Medicaid is that Medicaid and Medicare are able to negotiate with private companies where the government gives private companies the money that they would allocate towards Medicaid or Medicare. So, those private companies tend to provide better services. I also want to see an expansion of that, very similar to the expansion of school choice, because it's also from public to private. So we'll see. I hope that Trump is going to be taking these actions, but he is definitely opposed to services like Medicaid and Medicare. But, at this point, we don't really have a better option. So I want to see it. I'm not sure what we're gonna see there. But moving on from the trade deal, I wanted to discuss another topic, and that is the shooting that occurred just last night at around
Yeah.
6:30 p.m. in lower Manhattan, in Midtown, actually, Manhattan.
Yeah.
And to give you a little bit of a recap of what exactly happened, a person with an AR-15, uh, possibly white according to CNN, but black if
Oh
you
my
look at any other
God.
reporting.
What a
Uh,
joke.
yeah, he
Pathetic.
came in. I mean, but are you surprised? This has happened so often. I mean, like it's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
he came into a office building with what was it? Blackstone was in it. The
Yeah.
NFL was in it, and he started to open fire. He shot. I believe it was five people. Five people died or something like that, and
Including
he.
Kim, it's five.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and himself. It was a suicide shooting. So there's a lot of questions on the motive, but this is what we know for now at least. Number one, he used to play football and he has
Yeah.
some history with the NFL. It's not very clear what that history is, but it seems as if he blamed the NFL for his traumatic injury or something similar to that. So there's some history there, so that could be a possible motive. We also heard that he was yelling "Free Palestine" when he was shooting these people, according to multiple reports. So that is also a motive. Um, we also see that he's from Las Vegas, so he's not even
Yeah.
from New York, the New York area, which means that either this was premeditated or that he was here on a trip or something. But again, it's very confusing still. The situation is not being very transparent right now, and we also know that this is a key part that the exact building was actually on a map where that claimed to have all the locations where globalized Intifada would take place. So let me just quickly share my screen and show you this map, if you don't mind. We saw that there was this map where globalized the Intifada was, and posted by a very big account, pro-Palestine BDS movement account, and we saw that exact building was on it. And because it looks like Blackstone was in that building, so there
Yeah.
was obviously, you know, a double motive here. We saw something with the NFL and we saw this. I wonder which one it was. I want to know more about actually what he was saying during the rally too, because those reports about him yelling "Free Palestine" aren't really fully confirmed yet. It was just by eyewitnesses. But yeah, Ofer, I wanna hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, sure. So if I'm not mistaken, the shouting of Free Palestine was done by a different individual who was like nearby, and he was apprehended by the NYPD, and there's like photos of him. So like I could show that afterwards to you. But
That might be true. That might be true. I might have gotten confused with my reporting, but regardless of whether that was
mm,
by the shooter or not, do you think that there is a connection between this other individual who got apprehended and the shooter? Do you think he was yelling "Free Palestine" for the purpose that he saw a shooting, being carried out? If that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure it happened like a bit before, but who knows? Maybe he was actually like just emboldened by it and like he, had a like dose of adrenaline and
Yeah.
shouted that. Either way, that guy's stupid and like I'm happy that he got arrested. Yeah, well, but it's a bit more peripheral to the like main issue. And I don't think he ever said anything about Palestine or anything of that sort. He's like this dude is half black, half Japanese. Shane Tamura, that's his name. He
Yeah.
played football for 2 semesters, I think, or 2 years rather in high school, and then maybe it's not even confirmed he played in college. So it seems like either he actually did have some sort of traumatic brain injury that occurred during the course of like his time there where he was playing football and like he just crashed in head first consistently. You got to remember that he was playing like 10, 11 years ago football. And at the time, there were less regulations on the sort of padding that you put on your head or like the amount of time that you have to cool off between games. So
Yeah.
maybe it was like more intense then, and maybe something happened to him while he was playing. And
Yeah. And
now the like limits, like the minimum age to play flag football is like a bit older. And we only in high school we usually have school districts allowing people to even play football in a contact way because of the dangers that it poses to young children.
Yeah, there's a lot more about the motive, obviously, but the thing that everyone understands is that there's no clear motive right now because the NFL didn't have anything directly to do with him. I mean,
Yeah,
football, yes, but the NFL, not really. So it seems as if a big part of this was obviously his mental health issues. He had severe mental health issues that could have motivated him to carry out such an attack.
yeah,
For example, schizophrenia could do that. He could have hallucinated, so you just never know. But this was a clear mishap. And what is very concerning for me is that even this narrative of um, Palestine comes up when we were thinking about this shooting because it's not even crazy today to think that someone would shoot up a building in New York City in hopes of spreading their message of globalizing the Intifada. That's not even crazy to me. I don't think it's crazy to you either, and you're from Israel. So the fact that we're living in a society in a city with the biggest population of Jews outside of Israel, where it's normalized for someone to go into a building and shoot people because of them wanting to globalize the Intifada or the killing of Jews, that is just it's shocking to me. It truly is. Not only that, but we have to think about why was he able to enter a building that was
yeah.
supposed to be one of the most secure buildings. It was right next to where my father works, actually, literally a
Wow,
building right across the street.
wow.
Why was he able to enter that building where the biggest people in the world work, where the CEO of the NFL works, and he was there at that time. He was able to enter a building, and it seems as if he wasn't even stopped. So, I mean, we saw that an NYPD police officer died, which is tragic. He
Yeah.
saved, he sacrificed his life for saving others, but he would like this guy was still not prevented, which is very concerning. I don't know, like I don't know how this could have happened. I want to hear your thoughts still on it.
It's a problem because you would expect in a build every single building in Midtown and Manhattan in general should have strong security layers. And on paper it does. Like there is somebody standing in the lobby and like scans your ID and says, "Okay, you go to this floor." The problem is
Yeah.
they're not armed for the most part. I don't know if the person what is it called? 345 Park Avenue. Like, I don't know if he
Yeah.
was armed, the security guard, and he like ran away at that point, like when the shooter came in. Yeah. And
That's just ridiculous. It's like it's so sad.
it is,
But
yeah.
it's also not this. I don't believe it's the security guard's fault. If he's not armed, then he
Obviously,
has
yeah.
nothing there. But also something that's important is these are the same buildings that don't allow DoorDash drivers to come in and give their customers food. I'm not kidding. This happens to me so often in these buildings.
Yeah.
And they are the same ones who just let a shooter in. I mean, it's crazy. So I think it's half it really shows that the facade of being so safe in our cities, having so many security guards, that's all BS. That's not true. We are not any safer than we were before. We just have a scanner that doesn't allow someone to come in, but that's not going to save
Yeah.
someone from a shooter. And but you know what we do have or what we should have is armed security guards, not only in buildings, but in schools, in every single place where these shootings take place, because that's exactly what could prevent a shooter from going on. If we had an armed security guard in every single school, for example, there would be no such thing as school shootings. They would
Absolutely.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so I mean, the left is fundamentally opposed to this because of child trauma, seeing a person with a gun at a school. I mean, I don't understand that still. We see police officers walk down the street every day. Are you traumatized? I don't think so.
No.
Am I? Definitely not. So, you know, this is one of the issues that sh clearly show there's a lack of security. There's an easy solution. It's common sense to implement the solution. Just have an armed security guard that you will pay the same as a normal security guard, but you just need one of them. But the liberals are opposed to it. Like, why? And not only that, we get people like Mamdani, who is running for this, for the mayoral election and who will
Yeah.
probably win under every poll right now, will win the election. He has literally called for the defunding of the police. He called for criminals to be able to be you know, for cashless bail programs to be more open in New York,
Yeah.
for criminals to be reconciled with the environment more often than they currently are. So please explain to me, why does Mamdani think that instead of spending their time in Rikers Island, criminals should be spending their time in Midtown Manhattan?
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. You look at his tweets from 5 years ago, and 5 years ago wasn't that long ago. Like, come on, we
I
have to
mean,
hold
he
to high
ran for
standard.
assembly 2 years ago.
Yeah, in
So
Astoria, he ran in 2023, and even then he
yeah,
had like problematic posts in relation to his police policy.
yeah,
Like, you can look at what he said, just go to his Twitter account and search police and just scroll through. There are probably 100 tweets, and you go back a couple of years, and it's absolutely egregious, the sort of things that he said. The most famous one that he said is like, he had this sort of snarky reply where he said, where he was sort of like laughing at a police officer who was crying in his car, which that's just crude and crass and all. But
yeah.
then, like, in terms of substantive policy, he ran on ending cash bail in New York City, which is absolutely disastrous. We've seen it fail in every single place where it's been implemented, whether it's Larry Krasner, the district attorney in Philadelphia, or in LA with Chesa Boudin. Like, they all implemented this no cash bail policy, and now people get out to the streets after committing a violent crime and obviously reoffend. The recidivism rate is very high.
Yeah,
And
so
yeah.
Ofer, just for you to explain exactly what
Mhm.
cash bail is, a lot of people are going to be asking, okay, cash bail is cash bail is only for rich people, right? Because you have to have money to bail
Yeah.
yourself. Cashless bail allows poor people and rich people to have equal rights. So why should we ban one and keep the other?
Well, honestly, I think it should be reformed completely so it doesn't benefit anyone regardless of their financial status. It should be based on your risk assessment. So a risk assessment policy that does a background check on your previous sort of convictions or charges and then looks at the like chance of you reoffending, that would be a fair way to go about it. But when you just lower the bail and make it very low or make it free entirely and then let people out, then everybody is basically a threat, both
Yeah.
rich and poor. So that's counterintuitive and it's more harmful than cash bail because, you know, most of the violent criminals are poor. They don't have the money to pay for $500,000 or a thousand or $1 million bail. So then at least they're staying there and they're locked up. But yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with the idea that like, okay, white collar criminals shouldn't be let out either. It's not fair.
Yeah, and I actually want to mention something. This is a very hot take, by the way, so Ofer might not
Yeah,
agree with me. But in the Diddy trial right now, sorry, Diddy, obviously, he didn't get any bail when he while he was awaiting trial, and now when he already got convicted of two charges and is awaiting sentencing. I actually am very opposed to that because Diddy, the reason why you basically deny bail, this is a president all around the country. The reason why you can deny bail is A, because it's a flight risk, so you're scared that they're gonna leave. B,
yeah,
still a danger to society, and C, if there's a history of criminal convictions and it's too obvious to that like something else can happen. So Diddy though, he's definitely not a flight risk. The whole entire world knows who Diddy is. He's not running anywhere. He came to New York City to get arrested. He is uh he is not a threat to society. At least his crimes that he committed are not as of now a threat to society. He's not looking to kill someone, or to our understanding, he has no history of that. And he doesn't really have a past criminal history. So this is a candidate that should get bail. And the clear reason why the judge denied Diddy bail is because of the media persona, is because Diddy was
Yeah.
seen as, oh, such a violent guy. He's so famous and he did this. It's horrible. He has to be in jail for the rest of his life. But it's another example of how a trial gets influenced by the public media. So that's why actually I think Diddy did not get a very fair trial at this stage. And the judge was clearly biased towards the public perception. This is very similar to Derek Chauvin in the George
Yeah.
Floyd case, where A, got sentenced to three charges. I believe it was third degree, second degree, and first degree, or third degree murder,
Yeah, I think
second degree
second degree.
manslaughter,
Yeah. Yeah.
and anyways, his charges were completely crazy, um, based off nothing. And what's even more scary, the jurors knew that if they ruled on Derek Chauvin's case that they were not guilty,
Yeah.
they be killed probably by the mob in Minneapolis. I'm being 100% serious.
Yeah.
So these jurors were also able to go home every night. They were able to watch the news, see everything that's happening. So obviously they got influenced. So it's just an example of how the public perception can shape these trials, and it's so dangerous because if you're trying to discuss cashless bail, which is an issue. I don't think that poor people should have any disadvantage over rich people, but you should also start discussing these sort of cases where public perception is a direct influencer in the trial, which it shouldn't ever be. So, this goes, you can mention these two cases. You can connect even Jeffrey Epstein's files with this, because a big reason why Trump is claiming not to want to release them is because people are going to be guilty by association. Again, public perception. But it's just this example that public perception shapes so much in courts. And this is what we should be focusing on. We shouldn't be focusing on cash or cashless bail. We should be focusing on public perception, because that's the biggest factor in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, like in regards to Diddy quickly, like this is the problem with the assessment that you use when you set somebody's bail. Like you laid out the criteria, and technically, yeah, he doesn't have any sort of prior conviction. But if you were to like be reasonable and look at the full list of evidence against him, and look at accusations, and look at videos of him assaulting his girlfriend from 10 years ago, like let's say you did a risk assessment, which is something that Illinois has, for instance, that's their system over there. Based on that criteria, he wouldn't be let out because there's enough proof to say that, okay, it wouldn't be prudent for him to be released. It would
Well,
be a threat to society.
for everyone is guilty. I mean, innocent until proven guilty. And Diddy was
Yeah, but it's
actually
not a
proven
conviction. It's
innocent.
more so just like, okay, you stay here until the trial. That's the idea.
Well, Diddy was also proven innocent for almost all of his trial,
Yeah,
for
he
almost
was.
all of
He
his
was.
things, and there was never a charge of domestic violence. So there should have never been a risk assessment on his domestic violence charge, because he has that's irrelevant to the case. It has nothing to do with it, because the judge wasn't deciding whether he is a violent guy, because he wasn't getting those charges. He was getting um sex trafficking charges. That's
Yeah.
what they should have been doing the risk assessment on. Not only that, but even after the jury came to a decision, Diddy was still not released, even though his almost all of his charges, other than like two non-serious compared to the rest charges, were proven he was um not guilty for. So it's I don't think there's any denying that public perception had some basis in this case. I do agree that obviously he did assault his girlfriend. There were very, very scary videos of that. But again, this is not what the case is relating to. So it has nothing really to do with the case. If the case was a domestic violence case, that would be very different from a sex trafficking case.
This is actually sort of the issue with New York because, like, let's say somebody's arrested for robbery or grand theft auto. like theoretically, it should be relevant to whether or not you stay in prison for the until you actually get into the trial portion, whether you had a violent past. And that's
Yeah,
the idea of a risk assessment, which is something that we don't have in New York City. We don't have it in most of the country, but I think we should have it because it's just a reasonable way of protecting people. And the standard for whether or not you're released at that point isn't related to like your due process during your conviction. That's a completely separate arrangement. And whether you're released on bail is already something that's related to, okay, we're doing an assessment based on your individual freedom versus the threat to society. So that's
exactly.
generally the assessment that I think should be used. And that's something that we don't have. And getting rid of it entirely is so dangerous. It's why in 2020, when we released all those criminals because there was a backlog with COVID, they went out and reoffended immediately. You can't let
Yeah.
those people back onto the streets, even if what they did isn't directly connected to what they're gonna do in the future.
Exactly. And I also think that in Diddy's case, again, just referring back to it, he was never convicted of domestic violence. It again is just speculation. As of now, he is not guilty of domestic violence. He's innocent. He has never obviously there's videos of it, but that's for a trial and a jury to decide. But what I find very interesting about his case too is that the judge could very simply just put him on house arrest and tell him to pay for his own bodyguards, which has happened to many people in New York City courts. And Diddy would have probably agreed to that, almost definitely, I would assume. But the judge didn't even offer it. So, I mean, it's just look, the Derek Chauvin case was also very similar to this. I think that, the killing of George Floyd in general was taken way out of proportion. Derek Chauvin, people like Ben Shapiro believe he should be innocent and set free. I don't know if it's to that extent yet, but I definitely know that he should be getting a new trial, and almost all of his charges that he was convicted of are complete BS and should have never
Yeah.
ever occurred. And he should have been in jail max maybe 2 years for a crime that still doesn't even make sense because he was, just to go over the case a little bit, he was put in jail for practicing a police maneuver that he was taught to
Yeah.
practice in his academy on a criminal who had a violent past. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the disconnect. Look, the Black Lives Matter movement, you can hate it, you can love it, but come on, just use a better image to put the Black Lives Matter movement behind. So I don't understand. I think Derek Chauvin, like what has happened to him, I think Oprah agrees, was disgusting. And it showed to all police officers around the world, I mean, around the country, that this could happen to them. So it's a big issue. It has a lot to do with the shooting that happened in Manhattan because, again, police officers, I'm sure, were hesitant to enter that building, were hesitant to, if they were ending up to shoot him, if they had to, they would be hesitant to. And this is the culture that left-wing media builds up when they start prosecuting people like Derek Chauvin for something that he didn't do. But I want to move on a little bit to Mamdani specifically. Mamdani has, as we explained, has a huge history of being anti-police, uh, anti-cash bail, all of this stuff. And this goes very well with his socialist agenda. It's a part of the DSA charter to be against cash bail, to
Mhm.
defund the police. All of that is in the DSA charter. It's not completely made up. Um, Ofer, though, I wanted to ask you, is this the biggest threat of Mamdani, his criminal, his defunding the police narrative, or is this something that would have to happen with more people getting involved, whether it's New York City, state assembly, city assembly, or even the Trump administration?
It is an issue for city assembly because each year they pass the budget. And you look back at what he said in 2020, he was opposed to the $1 billion increase in the NYPD's budget because it went from 4.6 to 5.6 billion at the time. He was
Yeah.
against that. And he was also against giving overtime pay to NYPD officers. Think about that. It's so crazy. NYPD officers that are risking their lives and doing so even late at night. And he was complaining about the fact that, it costs money, obviously, to subsidize that. So that's the only example of a profession where he would be against overtime pay. So that's just hilarious that there's double standard for
Yeah,
police officers.
like you can think he's an anti-Semite. You can think he's a whatever Israel hater, that all really doesn't matter. The fact is he doesn't like police. Okay, he hates
Yeah.
police. He wants them to leave the city. Anyone who hates police and wants to leave the city wants New York City to look like Minneapolis in 2020.
Yeah.
So this is so ridiculous. This is just a disgusting reality. And if we elect someone who hates police, again, who has a socialist agenda too, can you not see like we are heading down a very, very bad track here? We're heading down a track where New York City is going to look like I don't know. I don't want to compare it to Gaza, but it's going to be a parking lot because of how run down it's going to be compared to what it is now. I'm generally like scared. As someone who lives right out of the city, I am extremely, extremely scared and concerned for what will happen when Mamdani
Mhm.
comes in. And we see that he's normalizing phrases like Antifada, like globalized Antifada, which are obvious phrases that make Jews feel uncomfortable and have led to violence in the past, have led to thousands of casualties on both the Palestinian and Jewish side. Uh, so why is he doing this? Like, why can't he just condemn the phrase Intifada? Why is it such a strong platform for him?
You look through his ideological upbringing, and it's all on Twitter to his credit. He never deleted any of it. So you can go through and see it for yourself. But he talks about how he believes in this sort of like progressive intersectional agenda, which combines economic justice, and we have our own criticism of that. But at least there, the intentions are in the right place. But then you look at the social agenda in relation to connecting liberation. That's what he refers to it between like LGBT people, black people, Muslims. He complains a lot about what he says was stop and frisk targeting black people and Muslims, even though
Oh my
that was so
God.
effective, right? That reduced crime in those communities
Yeah,
specifically.
stop and frisk was the best policy made by Rudy Giuliani
Yeah,
and followed by Bloomberg was the best policy New
exactly.
York ever has seen. It was unconstitutional, I will admit that. I don't believe it was proper. You can't, but those are the type of policies we need to see um, to continue developing our city. But it was not ruled unconstitutional because it was discriminatory. That's just completely false, and that's something Mamdani
Yeah,
claimed. That's something a protester at the rally I was a part of when I was debating them claimed too, and it seems like the entire MSNBC claimed that. But that's completely false. The reason why stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional was because of the Fourth Amendment, which
yeah,
prevented legal searches and seizures. I mean, it's common. I mean,
yeah.
that's
I need a
understandable.
warrant. Yeah,
Yeah. That really is understandable, but what I don't understand how it's discriminatory. It just happens to be that African Americans commit more crime than white people in New York City and all around the
yeah,
country. It is not because we are over policing their neighborhoods. We're actually under policing their neighborhoods. It's because we have a societal issue where the African American culture and the culture of Black people, Black family households is terrible. They have a culture of A, not prioritizing education, B, not having a father figure in the house, and C, being okay with uh um living on Medicaid and Medicare and those programs instead of finding a job for themselves. It is a cultural issue. It is not a social issue. They're two very different things. And that's what we need to help. Do I know how to help them? No. But I definitely know that the solution isn't to throw money at it or to throw to limit the amount of police in those neighborhoods. A comparison that I actually make in my new book that is hopefully going to come out in a few months, relating to school choice is the Jewish Hasidic communities in New York. They are extremely poor. They live in
they are. Yeah,
houses that look like shacks where they park their Toyota Sienna outside, and inside that house, seven different families live in, and it's tiny. Those
yeah,
communities are very poor, but they have a very different culture than African Americans. They don't create violence. They send their children to the best yeshivas in Brooklyn. They don't they don't prevent their children from going to college. They save up for college and go to wonderful schools, whether it's Torah study schools or normal colleges. And those people develop an education, and that's how they build wealth, and that's how they become successful. That's the same culture everyone in the world has to have. It's the culture that separates successful people from unsuccessful people. People when I say this, people call me, uh, you know, whitewashed or say that I want to whitewash other people. This is not whitewashing. It's called, developing a successful society. But um, in my opinion, the reason why I'm so passionate about this specific issue is because it's the biggest issue in the African American communities. Even if you look at the Latino communities, they also are not doing very well, but at least they value family. They value family greatly. They always have gatherings. That is a big, big thing. If you value family, if you value sticking together, that allows you to be much more successful than someone who doesn't value family. Sorry for going off on a tangent, but
Mhm.
Ofer, please.
Yeah, well, you said that very well that Hispanics do have an entrepreneurial spirit, and that's why you see them in New York City opening up bodegas and being up there on the streets as vendors.
Yeah.
The problem is, and just to like recalibrate what we were saying about Mamdani, you look through what he was saying, and he was consistently passionate about destroying NYPD. He called them racist. He said that they were killing, murdering black and brown people with impunity. He's talking about them as if they're some sort of terrorist organization. And then the obvious implication would be that he wants to limit their sort of funding and wherewithal. So he talked about defunding the police. He used those exact words multiple times during his campaign and when he was trashing his opponents. So it's not like we're putting words in his mouth. He was saying that a couple of years ago. He can't walk it back now without saying, okay, I was wrong. He never said he was wrong. He just forgot about it. He just ignores criticism. So that's a huge issue. You look at what his platform says, getting rid of Rikers Island. That was what he used to say a couple of years ago. So where are you going to put the violent criminals? Then there's going to be this massive outflow and they're going to eventually release them. It's a
Yeah.
huge problem. That's one thing. He talks about trying to reduce the amount of like activity of the NYPD when you're looking at domestic violence issues. Obviously, you should have police officers that are armed at a domestic violence incident. You shouldn't be bringing in people that are mental health experts that are gonna like come in with kumbaya and like try to resolve the issue with like I don't know a packet or something like that. That's so insane. It's completely disconnected from reality. You do need to bring police officers to encounters that have people with mental health issues because there's a huge possibility that they will get violent in that process. So you should train them to get ready for
Yeah.
such a dispute. But he's talking about instituting a new department for community safety, which will cost about $1.1 billion. And that will
Which
naturally
is
divert
not
funding from
Yeah,
the NYPD.
but that's not completely crazy. Like, I do believe that mental health is a huge issue in
It is, yeah.
American society, and we can have specialized. We should be investing in that. We can have specialized task forces for that. But it's crazy to say that they're the people that are going to be on scene when a person is going crazy. Come on, like,
Yeah.
you're not going to bring a doctor to a gunfight. You're just not going to do that. So. That's, in my opinion, what's crazy. But I do support investing in mental health. And I believe Ofer does too. But also to bring up the fact that 57% of the police NYPD force in New York City is non-white, which means that they're either black, Latino, or Asian. So 57% of the NYPD force are the exact races that Mamdani is claiming the NYPD force is racist to. Uh, I'm really not understanding the disconnect. Right now we have a mayor who is black, who used to be the head of NYPD. He is black. Is he racist also? I mean, come
Mm.
on. Like, this is just so ridiculous. It's laughable. I
Yeah.
mean, like, how can we be electing someone like this? It's like a joke. We are going to turn our city into a hellhole. You thought de Blasio was bad? It's going to be 10 times worse. Also, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the homeless policies that Mamdani has because there has been a lot of talk under the Trump administration, and he just announced an executive order, I believe it was what, last week,
Yeah.
where homeless are going to be mandated to stay at some type of shelter, whether it's a mental health shelter, which is what most homeless people need because most homeless people have a mental health or drug use condition, and they're going to be mandated. I first want to ask if Mamdani becomes mayor, how will he implement this? Number one, and number two, if like will Mamdani just let homeless people roam free in the city, or will he do something about it that's efficient?
I don't think he's going to do anything by force. And sometimes with homeless people, as cruel as it may seem, they're not going to really, in an obligatory manner, agree to get moved to certain areas. Sometimes they just feel more comfortable on the street, but that's not something that we should be allowing on the streets of New York City, which should be, the cleanest city in the world. It should be the most elite city in the world. So it's actually a disgrace to the entire environment over there that we do allow vagrants to remain on the streets and for it to get littered and for them to build encampments because it could reach a point where it's similar to San Francisco or Portland or Seattle. And over there, the situation is crazy because they talk about how they're going to open the homeless
Oh, Ofer,
population.
I want to stop you right there. It's
Yeah,
not
sure.
crazy. That's a complete lie. When the Chinese president comes, it is not crazy at all. Okay,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
wonderful
that's the thing.
solution.
It's a matter of willpower, and that's why it is crazy because they lack the willpower to assist the American people. But whenever it is within the PR sort of motive, or they want to just look good to the external eye, that's when they're willing to actually mop up the city, and that's when you do apply force. So that's obviously a model. What Gavin Newsom did that one time when Xi Jinping visited, it should be the exact model that we do in every single American city. So they talked about how they want to help the homeless population areas in like the western coast of the country. What they ended up doing was giving money to these NGOs that were completely corrupt, that used it to like basically profit themselves, and that's completely asinine to the name of an NGO. And they completely perpetuated the idea of homelessness because that's how they were able to survive. Then they started giving out drugs in an open air drug market because they claim that it's safer when you have an administrator who's giving them drugs rather than
Oh
them.
my God, don't even
Yeah.
get me started. And
So,
this is the
yeah,
basis of the Liberal Party now. I mean, of the Democrat Party right now.
yeah.
Um, of literally legalizing every single drug possible to make sure that people have access. I mean, it's so ridiculously like I can't even think. But oh, for also something that's very interesting, especially with the homeless situation in New York City, is in the Trump executive order, he acknowledges that yes, this is not a perfect option. Like we don't want to lock anyone in a mental institution or whatever. No one would want that. But our other option, which is just to leave them on the street to basically die and have the entire environment ruined because of it, that's not a good option too. So what is your solution? Like, what would you say is a proper good option for these homeless people? What would you like? Let's say Mamdani was a perfect mayor. What would you like him to do?
There's no choice but to actually apply force because you look at what we had in the 80s before Ronald Reagan closed down the mental institutions. But as bad as they were because they were abusive, you bring them back now with proper oversight and standards, and there's actually nothing wrong with it. We already have institutions for people that are, orphanages. So it's already something that's established that we have these sort of like government-run facilities that house people that have no wherewithal to be on the streets by themselves. So there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
doing that. And just to like tell you guys the issue, you can't have it's not beneficial to either the residents or to the homeless people to leave them out on the streets. The homeless people at night they get cold, then they have no way of like accessing good services, and then the people that are passing by are in danger if they're on drugs or if they get into a violent outburst. So there's no choice to either besides either taking them to one of these already existing homeless shelters, which won't work for everybody because some of these people do have serious mental health issues, actually more than the
Yeah.
majority. I would say 60, 70% of them do have some sort of mental illness. So those people have to be taken into insane asylums and treated with actual specialty instead of letting them roam on the streets where they're only going to cause harm for themselves and to the people
Yeah.
around them. But because we have this culture of basically non-aggression where we don't want to pressure anybody into doing something against their will, we let them roam on their own accord, and then it's actually counterintuitive because then they eventually end up harming the people nearby and they didn't consent to that either. So the entire ideology is just completely contradictory and it's destructive to a major city.
Yeah, and just to bring up a thing, I 100% agree with you, but I'm actually currently working on a story here. I have been working on it for a few months here, but there is this person who is right now in a psych ward, actually. He is being
Mm,
injected like 5,000 shots a month, which comes out, I don't know how many shots a day, but he has a very severe mental health issue where he can't, live by himself, all of that stuff, but he has been injected with these medicines for months, years on end now. Um, and it's obviously a very sad story. Psychedelics, not psychedelics, I'm sorry. These types of drugs are extremely difficult on the body. They really mess
yeah.
with your life. Um, so it's a very sad story, and they're not helping him these drugs, but he's still being injected. So in those type of situations, obviously, I think Ofer and I are both opposed to someone being injected for life with a certain medicine That is just tragic. However, there's other options out there. We can't let just people sit on the street, for example, and live because they're not going to live. Like if that guy, I speak to him, if that guy uh got out of the psych ward, it would be very bad for him. He would probably
Mhm.
die. So I don't know necessarily. There's no perfect option. That's why I think mental health is the number one cause of severe issues in the United States. It should be what every single administration should be focusing on and investing in mental health solutions, care, all of that, because it's extremely important. But it's an issue that we don't have a very good solution to yet. But uh, at least the Trump administration is taking some sort of action. That's what I like to see. Obviously, regulation for these institutions is going to be very high, or hopefully going to be very high. If it's not, then I will immediately condemn it when I see it. But this is exactly what we need, and Mamdani is fundamentally opposed to this type of stuff. But I think we talked about Mamdani enough today. I think I want to transition to the last topic. We really went on a tangent there with Mamdani. We were
Yeah, we
not
did.
supposed to anything relating to that. But
Hmm.
our last topic is how the government of France actually announced that it would recognize the state of
Hmm.
Palestine. Oh, for my first question is on a map, where is the state of Palestine? What are they recognizing? The Gaza Strip, the West Bank? What is it?
Based on the French definition, which is also the one that's recognized now by the majority of countries in the world, it would include the Gaza Strip, it would include the West Bank, and that would be areas A, B, and C, so the entirety of the West Bank, including all the settlements that Israel has built over there, plus East Jerusalem, which would be the capital of the country. So that's what France is explicitly recognizing, and that's what they're going to recognize by the end of August. That's what he said. And it's actually what the UK intends to recognize based on Keir Starmer's speech, unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire within that time frame. So that's the pressure that's being put on Israel. They're using the leverage of, okay, we're going to recognize we're a major power. We have nuclear triad in terms of France and Britain. And, they were one of Israel's closest allies at certain points in history. And for instance, the French helped Israel develop their nuclear program. And now you're seeing how everything shifted because now
Yeah.
Macron is actually willing to recognize a state that's considered, it's not even considered a state, but the populace there is considered to be an enemy by the Israelis. So you're seeing how that's a big shift and it's being used as pressure to force Israel to end its war that it's continuing now against Hamas in Gaza.
Yeah, and the very first few articles I was writing, I was actually writing exactly about this, how France betrayed
Mhm.
Israel, how Canada is betraying Israel, and I'm sure they're going to be next with recognizing the state of Palestine or whatever. But the funny thing is even Hamas themselves, they don't want these countries to recognize this territory as a state, because if they did, they would have agreed to the dozens of treaties in the past that actually gave the Palestinians their own state, and there was a two-state solution, but they don't want that. They want the entirety of Israel to be their state. So how can we have a state that doesn't even itself recognize itself as a state because they obviously are refusing. They have refused through the multiple treaties. How can other countries recognize that as a state? It doesn't work.
So there's been a shift in Hamas's policy in relation to the two-state solution, and this is due to them being astute political actors. They are very pragmatic, but we can't forget that their overarching goal, based on their 1988 charter and statements from older leaders going back to Ahmad Yassin,
Yeah.
Abdullah Rantisi, like it just the list goes on. All of them explicitly said that they want to establish an Islamic country within the entire confines of historic Palestine, as they refer to it, which would include what was considered to be Israel before the 1967 war, and even right after the 1948 war. So that would
Yeah.
just be from the river to the sea, as you know, that's a very commonly used phrase in the United States, for instance.
Yeah,
So
and that comes along with all the Jewish people, all the Arabs who are not Palestinians, all of them are going to be killed, to my understanding at least.
they would say either expel them or either they live as a minority group within Islamic rule. That there's a debate within like the Hamas nomenclature about what they actually believe should happen
Yeah.
afterwards, but none of it includes letting Israel exist or letting there be any sort of self-determination for Jewish
Yeah.
people within Israel, which has historically been the homeland for the Jewish people. So you look at like the progression of Hamas's policy, and they realize that it's not feasible for them to take back Israel via military force. So what they're doing now is being open to a two-state solution for a temporary period, and they would refer to this period as a hudna. That's how it's called in Arabic. It's basically a truce for 10 to 20 years, wherein Israel would give Hamas control over what's referred to as the state of Palestine by France and soon the UK. And then for 10 years, there won't be any fighting, there will be peace. But afterwards, that truce ends. And what do you think is going to happen after those 10 years end? Hamas is going to spend all that time building up, and then they're going to rekindle their goal of taking back the remaining portions. So
And
it's just a stage until
yeah,
you reach the final telos of the goal.
I mean, this is just so laughable again that there's going to be some 10-year truce. Come on, like,
Yeah.
have we not learned anything in the last 75 years about 10-year truces? I mean, the first year, yes, it will be a truce. The second year, Israel will be bombed again. I mean, it's all BS. It's all a lie. But also something that's important is that the Palestinian people that live in Gaza, what claim do they have to the land of Israel? Are they ethnic Israel? Like what is that? Like are they from Transjordan? Like where were they originally from?
Well, if you trace back based on genetics, it's a mixture of Arabs because you look at where Arabs originate from. It's from the Gulf of Arabia, which today is primarily Saudi Arabia. Then,
Yeah.
in the 7th century with Muhammad, he expanded into the rest of the Middle East and North Africa. So then Arabs populated those areas and they mixed with the original population, which at the time included Jewish people, Samaritans, Christians, and some like Roman citizens that were living there,
Mhm.
a bunch of like tribes that we can go off and list. So there was a mix between the Canaanites and whatever descendants they had in the Arabs, and that's the mix that today consists that Palestinians are made up of. So some of
Yeah,
them, if
and
you have a DNA test for them, you'll see that they have a certain amount of DNA that's similar to ancient Hebrews, or the closest genetic comparison today would be Arab Christian from Israel. They
mm,
have the closest sort of genetic similarity. Or you look at Druze, they also have they have pretty close genetic similarity as well. And also Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews have a
yeah.
pretty close connection.
And these the in history before the state of Israel was being developed and right after the first and second Aliyos, we saw that there was a big that even in those times there was a big debate of who will get the state of Israel and
Yeah.
who has claim over it. But during those times, the Arabs that lived there, the Palestinians that lived there, they lived in nomadic tribes. They didn't live in any settlements that were actually permanent. The land wasn't developed. There was maybe, I don't know, there's contesting estimates, but anywhere from 40,000 to 170,000 Palestinians that lived in this land. So nomadically in these tribes. So this was not valued at all. No one could care less about this. It's only when the Israelis actually developed this land and brought it to fruition that it actually people started caring about this land. So I mean, we go to Gaza. The situation in Gaza, they have been funded like per square mile, probably more funding than any other nation on earth per square mile. But they still are one of the least developed nations. They don't have anything. And that's not because of Israel, that's because of Hamas, because of Hamas is stealing all of that. But all of this story, all Israelis are familiar with it. Again, I will recommend you a wonderful book. The Case for Israel by Alan Dershowitz right here, the first book I ever read. If you can see it, I don't know if you can, but you get the
Sort
point.
of. But yeah.
Yeah. It's a wonderful book, if you want to hear all about this. But yeah, I mean, this was just a wonderful conversation. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts over it, but
Yeah, I mean, just to finish off, I would say that like you look back at the history from the late 19th century, yeah, population estimates from the time were between 400,000 to 600,000. Most of the people there were peasants. Then you had Zionist organizations that are connected to the World Jewish Congress, World Zionist Organization, Rothschilds that bought up the land legally under Ottoman and British law because afterwards there was
yes,
British mandates.
that's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And then because those Arab peasants had worked for Arab landlords that lived in areas outside of what today is Israel, they were naturally displaced and they moved into the urban areas. And that's when like the resentment grew. But this was all done through a legal process. It wasn't done
Yeah.
in a way that's extrajudicial judicial. So like if you look at a legal justification for the current settlements that are under Israeli control, then it's completely legitimate. And
Exactly.
also you look at the control of certain territories or certain lands, land ownership by Arabs in 1948 compared to today, and it's almost identical, despite the fact that there are all these allegations that there was mass expulsions. A lot of that, most of it actually was actually just due to a refuge that was done by Arabs fighting over there of their own
Yeah.
accord.
And no Arabs wanted to live in Israel at that time. There was no one who could care less about the land. It was horrible. It was a horrible place to live. They would much rather live in other regions of the Middle East. So that's why there were no rich Arabs or anything like that that lived in that land. They were just, the lowest of the lowest class who always wanted to move out of Israel into some other land. So the big issue, the big issue I find is that people don't understand that the Jewish people bought that land from the Arabs. It wasn't stolen, even though the Arabs didn't have any claim to it because it was under British control at that time. The Jews still chose to buy from it. So I mean, look, the establishment of the state of Israel. I mean, I have another book. I don't know where it is, but the Prime Minister discusses it. I don't know if you're familiar over with that book, but it's a wonderful book, written by someone who worked as a translator from Hebrew to English under I think it was the first four prime ministers of Israel, I
Oh
believe.
wow.
And he also goes into detail about how in the times of Ben-Gurion, there's was before the establishment of Israel, there was terrorism, all of that stuff within the Jewish settlements and everything. But anyways, I would recommend to read that book again to give you a history
Mm,
of Israel.
yeah.
But all of this is just going up to the fact that Arabs, Palestinians, they have no claim there. There is no reason why they should be living there. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be living there. I actually think that Israel should allow Palestinians, allow Arabs to live there as they are. That's why there's a Supreme Court justice in Israel that's Arab. That's why almost a third of the population in Israel is Arab. But the whole entire point is that it's because Israel is a democratic nation, unlike any other Muslim country there. So that's why Israel is so valuable for the US. That's why Israel is so valuable for every other country in the world. So, I mean, again, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I really think that Israel, I mean, all the allegations that it's facing is completely crazy. But that's my thoughts. We'll go into more depth with this in another episode,
Yeah,
hopefully
definitely.
soon. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. We're
Yeah.
excited to see you sometime soon. Have a wonderful day, and Ofer, if you want to finish anything.
Yeah, thank you all. We're going to get into much more detail, I think, in the near future about some of these debates relating to aid mechanisms into Gaza or the continuation of the war.
Oh, I
So that
can't
should be
wait.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, everyone.